Go. So today we're gonna watch this. Let's talk about the Monster Manual. Let's see what they got. So today we're gonna excited to see what they have. Let's talk about the Monster Manual. Let's see what they got. So today we're gonna excited to see what they're gonna explain to us. I want to know. You gotta know. Let's go. Mm-hmm. Let's go. Let's go. What is this? Oh, you'd think this intro graphics to the stream would be like D&D related or something, but it's not. Like, what's going on here? What is this? Supposed to start 10. Oh, wow. What do you got? What do you got, buddy? What can we expect with the Monster Manual 2024? I am kind of curious as to what changes they're gonna make, because to keep it backward compatible with the whole system backward compatible, it doesn't seem like they can make any changes. So we'll see. Here we go.
We have the new core rule books, and this is the final of the new core rule books. It's the Monster Manual. Was my gateway into D&D as a kid, looking through the monsters, absorbing all this information over time. So tell me what's new in the new Monster Manual.
Everything.
Everything is new.
In some way,
Yeah, what's new?
because when the two of us embarked on reimagining this book of beasties,
what's new?
and I think it's true for the two of us that like monster books are our favorite D&D
Oh,
books.
absolutely. No question.
Yeah. And so working on any monster book is a special delight, but working on the Monster Manual is like the delight of delights. And we not only wanted to improve every monster that was returning from the 2014 Monster Manual, but also add many new critters. And that combination of things has led to us creating a book that has over 500 stat blocks in it.
No.
making this the biggest monster manual D&D has ever had. And we have looked at every creature type and looked for ways to expand the number of creatures in that type. We've looked at high challenge ratings and seen how can we make those creatures more dangerous. And we've looked at all the creatures before that to see are there ways that we can make them more fun, add new surprises, make how they function smoother than they were before, and a whole lot more.
Was there something that stood
Okay.
out that you were really proud of, or that was really exciting to like revisit and revamp?
Well, for me, one of the most exciting opportunities for the book is to really make this feel like a Dungeons and Dragons monster manual. And that's going to sound a little weird because there's been numerous Dungeons and Dragons monster manuals, but this
Does
is a
sound a little
book
weird.
that's really rooted in showing you how these monsters exist in the worlds of Dungeons and Dragons.
Some more
So,
lore.
as much as we've put so much effort into the
More lore with the
reorganization,
monsters.
the new rules, streamlining and revising some of the narrative text, but right down to the art, you're going to open up this book and you're going to see the worlds of D&D and the monsters of D&D in those settings doing what they do. I don't think that there's a single monster in this book that's just, here's a critter floating in white space.
Yeah.
They're all in these worlds doing the things that make them exciting. We don't want to show you just here in the abstract as a creature. I want to show you the monster, the like rust monster, actually doing what it
That
does.
was my first
actually
monster I ever fought
dissolving weapons and
in
armor.
D&D.
What does
Rust
that
monster.
look like? So you
First-
can take
first
a look at
creature I
this
ever
and you
encountered.
can see the adventures that you can then have unfold at your table.
Yeah, none of these monsters are without context. And like you
Yes.
said, in every edition previous, the monsters were static. This was like, here's a picture, like almost like a wanted poster of the monster. And this is the monster in action, which is very helpful for new and old dungeon masters.
Because we wanted the art itself to inspire DMs, to get them thinking about how they could use these monsters in their stories.
Okay.
I think
It's
the
sticky
monsters
unicorn.
themselves are inspiring. I mean, I know going back to the first edition monster manual, those illustrations inspired my childhood imagination and continue to inspire me to this day. But we wanted to bring more so that, that rust monster, you actually see it rusting something. The beholder, you see it using its eye rays and seeing the dread consequences of those rays' use. You see in many cases like the awesome scale of the ancient dragons. You see when it comes to some of the new titanic creatures, just how gigantic they are. I think the Tarrasque image that we have in this book, better than ever before, shows just how gigantic and terrifying that monster is. And then to accompany that, every monster now, its description begins with the section that tells you the environment where you're most likely to meet the monster, to help DMs as they are sort of thinking about the map of their campaign and where they might want to place different monsters. They can see right away, oh, I'm most likely to have a creature like this appear in a forest, for instance. We also now have default treasure for all of the monsters in the book, or we tell you this monster just doesn't have loot. And that too is there to
That's cool.
help DMs
Treasure
not
suggestions
just
for
run
monsters,
the
that's good.
monster in battle
Like that.
or in a diplomatic encounter, but also really ground the monster even more in their adventures and in their worlds.
Was there a particular monster that stood out, or a couple of monsters that just can easily come to mind where you're like, yes, we have enhanced this. This is going to be a far more dramatic, combative experience running into this monster?
It's hard to pick any one or any group because there are improvements across the board. But I think a great example, family of monsters, are the ancient dragons. I mentioned that we made sure in the art that the
Right.
ancient
It's in
dragons
the title. It's in the name
really
of the game.
show off how majestic and terrifying they can be.
It's a cool dragon.
Or protective in the case of the metallic dragons, but also in the stat blocks, people are going to find that not only are these dragons way more resilient than they ever were before with the number of hit
So they've
points they
changed them.
have, but also these dragons are going to bring hurt more than they ever did before, and also have more tactical texture than they had before. We took a number of gameplay elements that used to exist outside the stat block in things like lair actions and moved those into the stat block itself to not only make the DM's life easier by having everything they need to know on running the creature right in front of them in the stat block, but also this was a chance for us to bring in new abilities. So for example, we in the past have said ancient dragons typically are spellcasters, but that existed as an option off in a sidebar in the 2014 Monster Manual. This time you're going to see that with the exception of, I think, the ancient white dragon, who's like just maybe starting to learn what a spell is.
Maybe another few thousand years.
Yes. The rest of the ancient dragons, they're now spellcasters. And so in addition to their usual physical menace, you know, with their claws and their tail
interesting.
and their
I always
their
use them as
great maws
spellcasters.
and their breath
Yeah, yeah.
weapons, they also now have spells they're casting. And
Yeah, I always-
that change
like, ever
is
since
going to
early D&D, I've
transform
used them as
how those
spellcasters,
creatures
but-
feel in battle. There's also an under the hood
More
thing
emphasis on that,
we
I guess.
did, not only with the ancient dragons, but with all of our legendary creatures. And that is, as we retuned all of our legendary creatures, we ensured that no matter what pathway the DM takes through that
Stick
monster
them in lich.
using the legendary actions, the monster is going to stay on CR. This is significant because a decade ago, the way we calculated CR was focused on if the DM chooses the most powerful option every round, here is the monster's CR. Well, many of us as DMs found that sometimes we don't want to choose the most deadly option every round, but then that also often led to a monster feeling weaker than it should. We have now changed our entire methodology so that when the monster, it says it's CR, like for instance for a legendary creature, no matter which sequence of legendary actions you pick, that monster is still going to be on CR, which is going to actually have a cumulative effect of making these monsters seem more terrifying, because there will not be those drop-offs that people had before of, well, I chose this option and wow, that monster felt way weaker, whereas the other DM never chose that option, they chose the other one and the monster felt much stronger. We've made it so that it is much easier for the DM to find their way through the stat block.
I'll have to see
an
that,
ancient
how that works.
dragon, or the blob of annihilation,
That'll
or
be
the
interesting.
colossus, or one of the other high CR creatures in this book, and keep that monster terrifying in a way that is appropriate for its challenge rating.
This also isn't just under the hood. Like, this is something that we discuss with the new introduction to the book.
Okay.
We lay this out and we present to DMs, hey, if you see these abilities, prioritize them. These are things you should be focused on. This is things you can do at your table to make sure that these monsters are living up to the incredible threats they can present.
Okay.
Yeah, because the introduction has a section that the 2014 Monster Manual didn't have, which is advice on running a monster.
Yes.
And it
Okay.
walks you through those
That's good.
pieces of, like, if you're as a DM, you're stumped
that could
on
be good.
what the monster should do. We
Yeah.
put in, always look for the following abilities and prioritize
That's
using
really helpful
them
for new
if
DMs.
your goal is bringing the hurt. Now, of course, in some scenarios, the monster's maybe a potential friend, and so DMs still have the freedom to have a monster be far less threatening, but we also wanted to make it far easier for a DM to bring the
I think that's a
thrills
good-
and the
good
terror
thing for new
when that's
DMs.
appropriate for their campaign.
To
It's hard
help
to choose from
them.
this much art because it's all new art. It's weird the monsters I probably didn't gravitate towards before, but now I do. Like the Marrow is terrifying. That art is just horrific. That is the scariest merman I've ever seen. I know it's not merman, but no, there's just a lot of examples of monsters maybe I wasn't inspired to use, where the art is now inspiring me.
I would love to hear you talk about that a little bit.
I mean, a lot of it feels like someone took a photo in the middle of a movie scene of what happened.
And that's very intentional. Like throughout the course of ordering art for the Monster Manual, we wanted to make sure
They've been very
that
focused on
you
art
were
in
getting
2024.
experiences that you can
So,
only get
makes sense.
from Dungeons and Dragons. So many of the monsters that are in the Monster Manual come from mythology. You've seen them at this point, since fantasy media is so pervasive, you've seen these monsters before. We're not surprising you with, oh, and this monster's called an ogre.
Yeah.
Like, you've got ogres. But let's see something now with, like, what does the monster actually do? And what does it do that's exciting in a D&D context? So for example, I'm thinking of a piece like The Spectre, where the Spectre is this pretty basic spooky ghost monster. There's lots of spooky ghost monsters, but the Spectre has a specific vulnerability where it's repelled by sunlight. And in that piece of art, you can see that the cleric in the image is surrounded by the sun, like a sun-like spell that the Spectre isn't able to encroach
I
on them.
mean, does the art give
There's
the
dozens
players
of
hint
instances
on,
like this.
on the
Even with something like
vulnerabilities
the
of
Mimic,
creatures there?
where
That's not...
the Mimic, we've seen the Mimic be a treasure chest dozens of times, even
can also
outside
be a door
of
or a bookcase
D&D
or
and
something
other
else.
media. We wanted to present, here's all the things that mimics could be, and show a room that an adventurer is stumbling into where, geez, like everything in that room is a mimic. You can see like the little faces on it. And those are just a few instances of we wanted
So
to
some of this
have
art
these
I
be
can't show my
examples
players,
of
basically.
not just experiences that you can only get with D&D, but to inspire you to, as the DM, to be like, oh,
Yeah,
I never
that's
thought of a mimic
art for
maybe
DMs, I think.
being a throne or being this other type of treasure. And now you can use that content as a springboard to your own adventures.
One of the things I love on the Mimic page and in so many of the other parts of the book is where you added those tables that are there to inspire the DM to think of, like for the Mimic, it's a list of tables or lists. It's a list of here are things the Mimic could be, or so many other monsters where it's like here are things that might motivate this monster, or the different forms another monster could take.
I mean, the motivation of a monster might
basically
be
you
cool.
put in so many, like what I think of as DM friends throughout the book.
It's something that we talk about as early as the introduction, that every D&D monster is an adventure, or is really a springboard to hundreds of adventure. Just the concept of a room with a beholder in it. That is a very different adventure from, and this is a room with a goblin in it. And as soon as you see these monsters and you start imagining, all right, what sort of environment is a beholder in? What is it doing? What's its philosophies? What's its motivations? And that's so different from these other critters. We wanted to really express that not just in the stat blocks, not just in the art, but in the narrative text with here's an exploration of what it could do. But you'll see throughout the book that it's filled with, like Jeremy mentioned, lists of here's things that Mimic could turn into, or for like a group of monsters like the Performers, where you get several performer stat blocks, here's the different types of performers that you might encounter. Just things to show some of that versatility and to express to DMs, this monster isn't one monster, this monster isn't one adventure, this monster is a whole spectrum of adventures and really anything that you can imagine. So they're all springboards to encourage that sort of imagination, that sort of world building, and doing the things with the monsters that a DM wants to do at their table, not just locking it into one thing that's our version.
And that speaks so much to how
that's
people
good.
actually
That's
use
good
the
to
monster
do.
manual. Is you flip through it and you think of an adventure. You
Yes.
start to daydream. It's a lot of daydreaming fodder when you're flipping through the book, and so you're just giving more tools
I
for
like
that.
the suggestions
in many cases,
for new
we
DMs.
wanted to
and
back off
good.
on some of the like deep lore elements. We
Right.
don't want
Oh, so
DMs
there's
to
not more
feel
lore.
like
Okay.
they need to have taken another class or that they've missed something
No, I was
in
wrong. There's not more lore.
learning about this monsters. We wanted to express, here's the basic overview, and in many cases,
Okay.
here's something that they focus on, here's how to use them tactically,
Okay.
here's something interesting they can do in battle, but then these are also interesting elements that are unique to them that you might be able to express in a spectrum of different ways. I'm thinking of the animated objects, for example.
Yeah.
Also includes a table of just why is this object animated?
Yeah.
And then it's like, maybe it's Fey trickery that did it. Maybe a wizard created it. Maybe the things are possessed or
I
something.
mean, I don't know why I
Every
need a
one of
table to
those
figure out why
possibilities,
animated armor is
that's a completely
animated, but-
different story. The story that is the sword is possessed and the sword is being manipulated by a mischievous sprite, completely different adventures.
And you mentioned before, we've got a series of humanoids. We've always, wanted to be able to well, what are the stats of a bandit? What are the stats of a standard druid? And now we have that in this.
And we had the NPC appendix in the 2014 Player's Handbook, and so those NPCs are returning. But yeah, we wanted to have them return with many companions, and so we added performers, we've added pirates, we've added more.
That's cool.
In even the existing groups, we've added more options. So now there are more cultist variants, there are more priest variants, there are more
that's good.
mage variants,
Yeah.
and so
A
on.
little
and so
one
forth,
note.
because we know how much DMs use that NPC section. I mean, heck, I as a DM use the NPC section of the 2014 Monster Manual more than any other part of that book. So even we, just as dungeon masters, wanted even more NPC options.
I use
in the
cultist a
book.
lot.
And so that means people are going to get to see a whole
Very
bunch
common-
of new NPC
very common
stat
encounter.
blocks. They're going to get to see the old ones enhanced in a variety of ways. And all of these will just give the DM even more pre-built material to incorporate into adventures and campaigns of their own creation.
So you talked about mechanics for high level. Were there some instances at lower level monsters and mid level monsters that really stuck out to you?
One of our goals throughout has been, let's make everything run smoother as much as we can, make sure the numbers are the best they can be to deliver the play experience people expect for each particular monster, and also see where we can incorporate some new surprises. So you're going to see, particularly at very low CR, often the main change will be like a number got adjusted slightly, or there's a new ability that replaces an old ability. But it's as you go up in CR, because it tends to be that as you go up in CR, the monsters end up having more moving parts. That's where you will see more and more new things. Here's one example. When you get to the vampire section, and Wes and I are both vampire fans, and so
We all are.
Yes, I think it's a D&D thing.
I mean, if
given
you've
that
played,
Curse of Strahd is the-
Everyone in this video is
Curse
wearing
of
black.
Strahd.
we're all wearing black. So not only are there more vampires than before, that's many of our monster families have expanded, and so we not only have a new lower CR option in the vampire section, but then we also have a new higher CR option and another new option in
Just
between.
more
So
range.
we
Okay.
have
So that's good.
I think 3 brand new vampires, but then the 2 we had before, the vampire spawn and the vampire itself, have also been enhanced. And people will probably first experience this facing the vampire spawn. Because the vampire spawn in our adventures is typically the type of vampire people experience earliest in their adventuring careers, and usually experience them in larger numbers than, say, a full-fledged vampire.
So that's good.
And
Yeah,
what people will see right away is some familiar things
like the
and how
goblins of
vampire spawn
vampires.
works. and I loved having this experience recently at 2 different conventions where I ran the new Vampire Spawn, and the Vampire Spawn, as the characters were fighting, suddenly just slipped away out of melee without provoking opportunity attacks, and while still having the whole rest of their turn. And the players at my tables who fought Vampire Spawn over the last 10 years in 5th edition were like, wait, what did it just do?
Yeah.
And that is one of the new abilities that the Vampire Spawn have, and you will see a variant of it in most of the vampires. And that was part of us really wanting to enhance the fact that vampires are extremely difficult to pin down. They are, they have this deathless agility.
So are goblins,
part of
technically.
their whole shtick
With
of
their
what makes them
hide,
terrifying is they are
but-
very difficult to defeat. And so we wanted to
If you
take
play
this
goblins
element
tactically
and
correct,
add
they're
it
very
into the
difficult. They're
vampires.
very
They don't all do
they're
it the
deadly.
same way. The Vampire Spawn might just be able to disengage easily, but one of the other newer vampires is able to actually fly around in the middle of battle without turning into a bat to do so. And so if people thought vampires were tricksy before, well, now they're even more tricksy. And another example of a family of monsters that we not only expanded, but that now has some new things to experience in it, is goblins. Goblins,
What was
one
I
of
just
the
talking about?
most used monster families.
Yep.
We have
Don't really
added
care for that
a
goblin
new
art, but-
spellcasting option. It's actually a return from 4th edition. In 4th edition, we had, it was one of my favorite monsters in 4th edition, oddly, which is the Goblin Hexer. And so we brought the Goblin Hexer in because we wanted in this collection of goblin stat blocks to have one focused on using tricksy magic. But then we also added a lower CR goblin because we realized sometimes DMs just want goblins in really high volume, and the regular goblin that we have can often serve that role, but we wanted one that was even lower CR, and it's called, appropriately enough, the Goblin Minion.
So that'll
where
be
just
the first encounter in
truckloads of them
Phandelver, because
can be
right now the
unleashed,
first encounter in
into,
Phandelver is
a
deadly with the
battle.
goblins,
And then
as
we
they
looked
are.
at that whole family where we had the Goblin Warrior from before.
mean,
we
it's
also
like
had
4
the
goblins
sort
for
of
first level
boss
characters.
Goblin,
Kill
and we
them.
made sure that all of those stat blocks, the ones that we had before as well as the new ones, fit together to actually feel like a group. You're going to see that in the Gnolls, and group after group.
I like
They
Gnolls.
they work more
Gnolls are just
cohesively
badass.
as a group, and Gnolls are more terrifying than they've ever been before,
They're already
particularly because
terrifying,
we've just
so, yeah,
embraced
that's
now.
good.
Gnolls are fiends. These are not just bloodthirsty humanoids. No, they are hopped up on Yinogu
Yeah.
blood,
Yeah, they're on
and
crack.
are actually fiends.
Yeah.
Similarly, the goblins are, rather than being humanoid, are fey.
Right.
And this is something we've been nodding toward in a number of our books in recent years.
for a while now, yeah.
Of the goblin roots in the Feywild, and now we have fully
Okay.
embraced that. Which
Goblins
really
are fey.
connects to yet another thing is people are going to see a number of
Interesting.
creature type shifts throughout the book. And we've done that in some cases for mechanical reasons, other cases for narrative reasons, and sometimes for both. So, just I mentioned Gnolls are now fiends,
Penguins.
goblins
Yeah,
are now
penguins.
fey.
Don't
Some
you
creatures
attack my
that
penguins.
before might have been monstrosities or humanoids that are now elementals. And that we did sort of early on in the project a vetting of all the creatures' types and made adjustments to make sure that they were really landing in the correct part of the sort of ecologies of the multiverse, not only for what we want to do with them mechanically, but also for future stories.
I don't really care
I'm
for
also
that art.
really thrilled
but
with how many instances you have of different types of monsters. Like, there's the Revenant, but there's an addition to the Revenant, which is terrifying. The Death Knight. There's the Death Knight, but also there's an even more scary element to the Death Knight. I love that expansion. Also, the art feels very stylized specifically to that monster in a way that I
Some of the
haven't seen
art
before.
is
Like
some of the art is
everything
good, and some of
undead
it's
feels very
yeah.
Ravenloft. You know, it has that gothic horror feel. Like all the undead have a very signature style now, it feels like.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, for each monster, we wanted to make sure that the whole package was providing the experience that we wanted. We didn't want it to be just, all right, and then look, here's the skeleton wearing armor, but we describe it as something that's completely terrifying, and then the rules like really present it as this devastating force. We wanted to make sure that everything was really working in unison. So the art, the narrative, the game design for it was all very much considered one package, reinforcing the stories that we wanted to share with the readers and making sure that DMs were going off in a direction that was appropriate for what the best parts of these monsters are. So you mentioned the Death Knight, for example. So yeah, the Death Knight is described as, you know, this overwhelming undead commander, and then you see that in the art with the Death Knight.
I mean, that's good.
actually
There's
leading.
consistency
But
with
in
the
this
art
case,
and what the
he's not
creature
just
is, so there's
leading
more
a group
consistency
of
there.
rank and file skeletons.
It's good.
We didn't want to show this high-level undead warlord with some of the lowest CR threats in the game. Instead, we've presented an entirely new stat block called the Death Knight Aspirant, where these are like heralds of the Death Knight. These are champions undeads that are like lieutenants to a Death Knight. Doing a few different things, it creates the potential for a more unified encounter experience where now you've got a Death Knight with other higher level
Instead of just a bunch of cannon
minions that
fodder.
it can be presented with. But then it also allows you to have your Death Knight experience at lower levels with the Aspirant.
Yeah, exactly.
There's so many monsters where it's like, I'd love to include a Lich in this adventure. We are level 1. So having some of these additional options, in some cases higher levels, in some cases lower levels, allows
Lich at
you
level
to get
1.
more of
Fun.
these iconic D&D monsters more in your game, sometimes earlier, sometimes later, but increasing the utility overall.
Yeah, because you want to feel like, it'd be great to feel like you're thwarting the plans of a Death Knight earlier on, and not just be skeletons. But then you're also making the Death Knight way more scary by having an entourage.
Exactly.
And this has just been part about Death Knight culture in D&D anyways, you know, like all the way down to Lord Soth, you know, he has his 13 knights, things like that. That's just, you don't often imagine Death Knights by themselves now.
Exactly. There's even an example of one called a Gas Gravecaller, which is presented as just a new spellcasting ghast.
Interesting.
But we even present it in the art with like the Lich, just to suggest like, if you want to have either a monster that is appropriate to be used with the Lich to like be its apprentices, or if you want to have that Lich-like experience earlier on, here you've got this lower level undead spellcaster that you can explore that with.
What does it feel to have completed the new core rule books, all 3?
I'm still internalizing that because we've been working on these books for years. Literally multiple years. And
you got some errands still, but
it's still sinking in. But it's a great feeling.
But I mean, generally, I
It was
think you did a good job
get
with it.
to end with the monster manual because, again, for me, a monster book is like dessert. The monster manual also, in many ways, is a culmination of things that people saw in the new Player's Handbook and the new Dungeon Master's Guide, because the Monster Manual relies on many of the rules enhancements in the Player's Handbook. It relies on the thinking we had in the Dungeon Master's Guide about making DMs' lives easier. And so you get to the Monster Manual, and this is all about taking rules elements from the Player's Handbook, mixing it with our make DM's life easier philosophy from the DMG to make this host of monsters
That's
that
cool.
are there
Yeah, I
to
like that art.
inspire, to be fun at the table, to surprise players, to feature elements of the rules that are new in the new versions of the core books. Like there are more monsters now that make use of the fact that the game has the term bloodied back. So you're going to find monsters that have things triggering within their stat blocks when they're bloodied.
I always use
You're
bloodied
going
to describe
see
how bad the
exhaustion
monsters
used in ways that it hasn't been used before,
So, yeah,
because
that's good.
the condition was redesigned and now we can use it in certain ways that we were hesitant to use in the past. And just on and on, you'll
Because
see monsters.
exhaustion was punishing.
Even now, some of our spellcasting monsters able to
2014.
cast some of the new spells in the 2024 Player's Handbook. Because when we designed those new spells in the Player's Handbook, they weren't just for our player characters. We also had one of our eyes on the monster manual, knowing some of our monsters are going to want to be able to cast these spells. And so
should be the same.
all of it, you're going to see that the monster manual truly is the culmination of the core book revision that we've done in part to simply celebrate 50 years of D&D.
And now you get to see how all three of these books work in unison now.
Yes.
Absolutely. You're also going to see many of the innovations that were originally presented in the Player's Handbook really take form here, fulfilling on the promise of things like some of the new stat block formats that we presented at the
I would
end
like
of the
to see
Player's
a
Handbook,
picture of the
with
new stat block
those usable
format.
creatures like
That'd be great.
just the imps and a lot of the animal companions back there. Well, now you're going to see a whole book where the stat blocks are so much more
Show
inviting,
me a
so much
picture
more
of the stat
usable.
block.
The organization is so
Show me
much
that.
crisper. We've
Show
spent a
it to
lot of
me.
times really making sure that wordings are tight and concise, that the gameplay experience
buy the book
is
to see
really at
that.
the forefront of so much of our design to make sure that a DM can look at these stat blocks, make a choice or two, and run an interesting encounter. It's all been designed with playability being front in mind, and we want to make sure that the experience of using the monsters of this book is easy, inviting, and exciting.
And
what's the stat
because
block?
in some ways our team has the philosophy of anything worth doing is worth overdoing, we didn't just bring all of that to what was already there, but we added over 80 more monsters.
Is that all?
Right. And it was funny toward the end. I was even joking a few times because it's not nothing adding over 80 monsters to the monster manual. I kept joking like, who decided to do this? It's my fault. Because we not only wanted to expand the various monster families,
if you've expanded the
but
families,
also
then
bring
you're going to add
people
more monsters.
more high CR threats, and also flesh out some of the creature types like you mentioned, Todd. So I think one of the reasons that and it's gratifying to hear you say that earlier, that you're like, it feels like all the types are fleshed out more. That was a very conscious effort on our part, that we wanted to feel like each creature type really sort of earns its place in the book. Now, there's still some creature types that have way more monsters than others.
Right.
That's just how.
Sure.
There will always be more fiends than plants. At least in the monster manual. But we wanted to make sure that in each of these types, a DM felt like there were more toys to play with, and more toys to play with at a variety of levels of play. And we've talked before in some videos about the number of new high CR threats in this book.
Yeah, that's the thing I'm very much in love with, because now I also feel, as a Dungeon Master, you've given me the stat blocks for my big bad.
Yes.
Like my end of campaign villain, whether it's an Archhag or the Blob of Annihilation, this Doomsday level threat. I feel like I have the stat blocks for that now, for the first time.
And that was our goal. We wanted
So more
we
big
wanted
fatty
the DM to be
stat
able to look
blocks.
through the book
Great.
and essentially have
It's
a
very hard to
menu
find
of
those.
options for what is the big bad at the end of this campaign. before you had some great options in like the dragon category,
Yeah.
the undead category, and the fiend category. That was kind of it. And so now we made sure that you have an option in, heck, even the construct category,
Yeah.
in the celestial
Okay,
category,
that's cool.
in
Yeah.
the ooze
Construct,
category,
big
in
bad.
the
That
fey
would be great.
category, and so on
Fun.
and so forth. Yeah. And part of it also, just from a world building standpoint, we wanted the Tarrasque to have some fighting buddies. Because we like imagine, these like monster mashups, and and we just thought there can't just be
Tarrasque is
one
the kaiju.
kaiju. There's
Yeah.
got to be more.
There you go,
And
said it.
so
Kaiju.
there are definitely more now.
And the Tarrasque is still absolutely the king of the ring. Like, it's the highest CR critter in there. But, like, setting up an entire campaign where the DM has in the back of their head is like, but the last adventure is the cultists are going to unleash this ancient colossus, and it's going to go stamping around with like the power of like an ancient god destroying things. That's a very different story than you could really set up easily with some of the older monster manuals. So it's exciting that these endgame adventures, the possibilities have really expanded.
And we did make sure that, the Tarrasque up there at the top, even the Tarrasque has new surprises.
Yes.
So anyone who, whether they played their way to 20th level and faced the Tarrasque, or as many of us have done, just have a 20th level one shot just to fight a Tarrasque.
I might do that. 20th level one
People who
shot
fought
to
it
fight a
before are
Tarrasque
going
would
to
be
be
great.
surprised.
Might do that.
Some of the old tactics of, we just stay here at far range and pink, at it, and it can't do anything back at us.
Try it.
Yeah, try it. Yeah, try it and find out.
No, that works great. You should do it.
The Tarrasque has a whole new kit of abilities that it did not
Okay,
have
cool.
before. Partly, not only to keep long-time players on their toes, which was something that was on our minds throughout this book. We wanted people who've even been playing, since the 2014 books came out till now. We want them to face surprises in this book. And also just to keep things fresh, so that even if it's a creature you've fought, 20 times in the last 10 years, in many cases you're going to find something new. That's going to require some new tactical thinking to get around what the monster is doing. And the Tarrasque is just one great banner example of that, because, again, the people who thought they could just hang at far range and take it out, again, try it and find out.
I actually really appreciate small little things like you mentioned the environments right off the top with these monsters, but you also kind of give descriptive language almost in like a hashtag way for me.
There, at the right after the names of each one of the monsters, we now have a little tagline, just a little bit that's like the subtitle, just like
I wish they would
just
show
stick with
us this, like
monster.
just
Like,
show instead of the
a
artwork, they would show it.
Nycaloth.
I wonder what.
What? So,
Why?
yes, you can go down and you can read about it, and it's going to tell you, but at a glance, you can see just a little flavorful 2 or 3 words that's just like you said, like a little hashtag or a little quick summary.
Why are they not showing us
I'm
this?
thinking of the skeletons, for example.
And we don't mean literally there's hashtag.
Exactly.
No, I think of it as the TLDR on
Exactly.
every
Yeah.
monster.
This is the vibe.
Here's the gist, exactly. I mean, I think for skeletons, it's like ossified evil. I mean, it's just this little, like, something that is both like, oh, okay, it's like this like evil skeleton monster. I mean, if you don't know what a skeleton is, you can also check the dictionary, but there's other monsters that are definitely require a little bit extra. And in many cases, the intent is to summarize, but also to give you a narrative gist, just to put you in the right headspace for everything you read after that. It's like a title and a subtitle. So if you're going through, you can just run through real quick. And many of these monsters, their names are just made up words. But then you get that little bit right afterwards where if you've never encountered it before,
I mean, that's good.
it's
Another
that.
thing that's good for new
This is a monster
DMs.
about puzzles. Oh, this is an Underdark ambusher. Oh, this is a giant of the skies. Things like that. And then you can read on if you want, or if that's not what's capturing your imagination, just turn the page.
And this is a wonderful example of some of the fruits that ripened because of us working on all 3 books as essentially one giant book. Because this tagline approach is also in the player's handbook.
Yep.
The classes have it, every subclass has it, and just as there, it's so that we can draw people in quickly, to give you a taste, so that if you're especially a time-strapped dungeon master, you can quickly orient yourself as you're going through the monster manual and figure out, is this a monster maybe I'm going to add to tonight's game, or in the adventure I'm dreaming about that they might get to 6 months from now. So much of this is about getting people to the information in
Hopefully
a
you
variety
planned
of
out your
ways.
monsters
The book also
before
has at the
tonight's
start
game, but
an alphabetical list of every single stat block in the book, so that you can find the stat blocks quickly. But then it also has at the back of the book multiple monster lists that give the DM multiple ways to essentially
where they are.
sort. You can look for
Okay.
monsters by CR. You can look for monsters by creature type. You can look for monsters by environment.
Great.
You can
That's
look
a
for
great
monsters
index.
by subgroup. So let's say,
Yeah.
you know, oh, I know fiends, but I just want to know what all the demons are. We've got you covered. We have a demon list. You want to know what all the devils are. There's the go to the devil list. And so there's also a lot more infrastructure
Yeah, that would be a
in this
great
monster
index.
manual than in the 2014 one to help DMs prepare and design adventures.
Something that we haven't mentioned is the organization of this book is significantly different than the 2014 Monster Manual. If you look up Pit Fiend, you will not find it under D. You will find it under P for Pit Fiend.
Yeah.
So all of these choices were really meant to
Finally.
aid
Finally.
folks who maybe
Finally.
don't have years and years of D&D experience knowing, Pit Fiend, that's a devil. I should go to the Ds and look for that. Rather, this is meant to really make sure that folks, whether they're a first-time player or have been playing for years, they can just go to the book, they can look things up alphabetically, they can find it in a very intuitive way, they can find it in that initial alphabetical listing. They've got multiple options that they can track down this information. And if they still want to do things like, hey, I want my listing of all of the devils, it's important for me to know what those are. Well, they might not all be under Ds anymore, but we still have that information in the book. You can still find that organization. None of that has been lost. We've just presented more options, and hopefully in a way that is prioritizing being as accessible as possible to the widest number.
This is really great for
Early
new
on in the
DMs.
process,
A
we
lot of new
joked that
changes for good.
We no longer
DMs.
want someone to have to know so much about D&D that to find the gelatinous cube,
Right.
they
You
have to
look
go
up-
to O.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because you have to already know a lot about D&D to even think to look under ooze to find the gelatinous cube. And now you can just go to
That's
the
great. That's a
there
great
any-
change.
Monsters for the art, it's like, well, this is such an iconic monster. How do we nail this?
Oh, I mean, I think, at least for me, one that probably required the most conversation was the Displacer Beast, where it's just, this is a D&D poster child. Like, that, like, it has to hit, it's got such an iconic look to it, it's so D&D, but then it's also a piece of art depicting a monster that has an illusion that is misleading an adventurer, but then also has to be clear to the viewer that this is an illusion. The piece that we've got for it is absolutely incredible. It ended up, we really wanted to show off, like, this is the Displacer Beast, and it is tricking an adventurer into focusing on its illusory copy. So even when you look at the piece, it takes a second glance to really figure out which one of the two Displacer Beasts that you're seeing in the piece is actually is actually the fake. And you can see that the archer in that piece
Some of this
is
art, though,
focusing
is
on
not
a
for
displacer
players.
beast that
Right.
looks very convincing, but if you really look at it, you can see these like wispy magical effects that are a telltale sign that it's actually the double.
So you gotta be careful
and then
about what
behind
artwork you show players.
the adventurer, you can see that the real displacer beast is ready to pounce. That was a tricky one.
And we talked about this before, but like every piece of
Yeah.
art feels like a story hook, or like we showed
What's
up in the
the
middle of
trade-off?
the story, and that gives it kind of a storybook flavor in some weird way. Like every page, I'm like, oh, that's something that happened.
You know, every dragon got a glow up in terms of its design, which
And now there's wormlings.
yes,
Yep.
Art.
the
Okay, cool.
yeah, all of the wormlings, the young dragons, the adults, the ancients. You can see the dragons are sort of over their lifespans in the different illustrations. You can see some monsters. Their appearance is very similar to what you saw in 2014, and then in others, it's been reimagined in a variety of ways. Like I think of the Horned Devil. I like the 2014 version. I love the 2024 version, and in many cases, we really wanted to, when we redesigned a monster, wanted to bring out the monster's story and personality better. Also, people are going to see in the art sometimes male or female versions of a creature that they've never seen before. So, for instance, in the Dryad painting, you now see both a male Dryad and a female Dryad.
Same for the hag.
Yes, hags. They can be aunties or uncles, grannies or grandpies, depending on your storytelling taste. Satyrs, you can see male and female versions.
Gender-specific hags.
We've also reimagined the succubus and the incubus, and rather than having sort of succubus and incubus just indicating the gender of one monster, we've instead turned them into two different monsters. Either of those monsters can appear as male or female, so you'll see on the succubus page there's a male version and a female version, and on the incubus page there's a male version and a female version. And what we decided to do is sort of delve into the folklore for this creature, where the succubus is the one you sort of meet in the material plane, and the incubus is the one who haunts your dreams. And the succubus can turn into an incubus, and the incubus can turn into a succubus. So there are all sorts of
Very
new,
fluid.
not only gameplay experiences for people to get to enjoy in their game, but also new story possibilities
fluid.
because of
Weird.
some of the reimagining we've done with creatures. And just the succubus and the incubus are just one of many examples.
And this is another good example. Just like all the undead art feels like it's coming pure, terrifying gothic horror. The devils and the demons are ultra metal this time.
Which was
not they
very
weren't metal before, but like
and that was
the bone
very
devil is terrifying.
And that was intentional.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That art style is just aggressive.
Yeah.
Like it's the right tone.
That's something, again, absolutely intentional. Like, we did not want to come to this and be like, well, the expectations for D&D art are this.
Yeah.
Every one of these monsters is a different story. D&D can be so many different stories. We wanted to put that front and center with the spectrum of monsters here, really reflect the spectrum of different stories that you can tell, and that's conveyed by all of the different styles. So you'll see some really menacing stuff in here, some like absolutely metal pieces like you were expecting, but there's also some pieces that are freaking adorable. So yeah, definitely a little bit of something for everyone.
Why is the Monster Manual so precious? It is, I think Chris Perkins got his start by reading the Monster Manual. I got my start by reading the Monster Manual and just daydreaming.
My first D&D book was the first edition Monster Manual. And now, part of that is it was the first of the AD&D books.
Right.
And it's funny, years ago when we were first planning out the core book revision, because we were also going to be celebrating the 50th anniversary, we also considered having the first book of the three, be the Monster Manual. Now, we decided to save it for last because we knew that the work we were doing on the other two books would inform the Monster Manual. We also saved it for last because we knew that in the
Got an
months
arrow
of
sticking on
the
them.
core rulebook revision sort of rolling out, we knew it would be easiest for people to play with the old Monster Manual using the new Player's Handbook and Dungeon Master's Guide. And so it just, for a variety of reasons, meant we should end with the Monster Manual.
And not the other
even
way
though we
around.
were tempted as a nod to first edition to start with it.
Yeah.
And
That's
it is
one of the first
such
books I
a
had too, is the
precious
Monster Manual.
book because the Monster Manual, like
I wish
the
I still
Player's
had my
Handbook,
first edition Monster Manual.
touches almost every session of D&D play. Because just as players are using character abilities and spells and equipment from the Player's Handbook every single session of play, the Dungeon Master is using creatures from the Monster Manual in almost every single session of play, except for cases where they're using monsters of their own creation or monsters from another book, like Monsters of the Multiverse. But the Monster Manual is sort of always there in the background. Because even when a
You always
stat
gotta
block from
have it.
that book might not be in your current session, there is a good chance the Dungeon Master has been inspired by something they saw in the
Wish
Monster
they
Manual.
would show us stat
And,
blocks though, but
it has this,
just so
has
we could
always
see
had this
how this looked.
special place in the game. And you talked about it earlier, Todd, of it's not just a game book, it's an inspiration book. That it, sometimes one monster's entry in that book will inspire an entire campaign. A DM will look at the description, perhaps of the new Empyrean, and decide they're going to create an entire culture in their world about these god children and have a campaign that is all about allying with one of these divine children in a war against
That
another.
does sound like a
And
cool
that's just
campaign.
one monster out of over 500. And so you could almost think of this book is the book
That
of
does sound
over
like a cool
500
campaign.
campaigns, because you could base a campaign on almost every single creature that you find in this great tome.
There's also an aspirational
That's
element
good.
for just players. I figured out the type of characters I wanted to play, partially because you are so often defined by the
Oh.
enemies you fight in D&D in some way. And so you think about, you daydream, you think about, like, if I'm going to fight an archhag one day. And I don't think there's anything that's so informative about what D&D is than flipping through this book.
It also shows you your character's potential friends.
Yeah.
Because there are...
Not everything has to be a fight.
Yes.
Well, but also because there are so many benevolent creatures, and there are actually even more of them
Yeah,
in this
good.
Monster Manual than before.
Good.
Because, again, looking at how
You need
DMs
that.
have used the 2014 Monster Manual, we know how often DMs go to the Monster Manual for helpful NPCs, for the monster that maybe is meant to be that kind of fake out where, the DM knows the players are going to think it's a threat,
I
but
don't
then
want
discover this
my
monster
players
is
to expect
actually
every counter is
working
gonna
on
be
their
combat.
behalf. And so there, I think, are going to be even more
Just
fun surprises
so
also
to
from a
one note
narrative
if every
standpoint,
encounter is combat.
because of people meeting creatures
cute.
now where maybe like, I'm not
Critter.
sure what this creature is up to. They meet one of the new sphinxes and we'll have to figure out, well, like what is this sphinx even about? And what is this new kind of fiend about? What is this new kind of vampire about? And I look forward to now years of people telling whole new stories using the new monsters in this book, as well as the hundreds of returning monsters that have been enhanced for years more of play.
Thank you so much for watching this video. We will have a ton more videos all about the different monsters in the new Monster Manual.
Maybe
You
with
can
some stat
purchase the
blocks
brand
would
new
be
Monster
great.
Manual and all 3 of the core 2024 core rulebooks by clicking on the link in this video description.
Yeah.
I'm Todd Kenrick. Thank you so much for watching.
All right, so that was fun. Yeah. So I think we're going to have. Bring back to my camera here. So that was interesting. Artwork that informs like more of what
the monster is, kind of gives, story of the monster more. But the downside of that is also that artwork that maybe you can't show your players because it gives too much away about their special ability. So, uh, yeah, that is a thing. Then the other thing is just more creature types, like more creature families in that family, like of different CR levels, which is good. So variety. They more actions for them to do, and the CR levels are more in line with the actual creature, because I do find that a lot of times the monster manual CR doesn't match up with it. Like I throw it into the encounter and it's very easy for my players, and then I'm disappointed, and they're disappointed because it wasn't interesting. Um, Having tables to show me what monsters are in different dungeons, and then the other thing too, like a suggested magic, you suggested treasure that you're going to find with the monster. That's good. That's all good. I think this monster manual, it seems like they had a very heavy emphasis on new players, like, and you get an example of that with how it's indexed now. Um, so a very heavy emphasis on helping new players, which I think is great because it is hard. Like they brought up the example of the gelatinous cube, and you have to know now to find it in an index. You have to know now that it's an ooze, and so now in 2024 you don't have to know that. You can look it up by gelatinous cube, which is good. I think that's a really good change because that helps out a lot of new DMs. Yeah, so I generally think this is good. I think I am sort of disappointed with a little of the artwork, uh, you know, because now I just can't open up the monster manual and just show my players artwork like this is what you see. I get why they did that though, and uh, and I know that there just wasn't enough space to keep both. Sort of like just this is the creature sort of thing, and but I that's sort of my thing. You have to be much more judicious and careful about what artwork you show players now, and maybe prep that more in advance about the artwork, for the theater of the mind, to show them what they're actually facing. Like the Displacer Beast, because it kind of gives it away. Like if you show them the artwork, for instance, of the Displacer Beast with the first one in front of them, the illusion, and then the real Displacer Beast behind the adventurer, that's gonna give it away, right off the bat. For the players, they're gonna be like, "Oh, okay, well, this is an illusion, and I'm looking for," if they've never encountered a Displacer Beast before. Um, so, but I get why they did that, and I think that's more to inspire DMs, which is great. So I think that's good for especially for new DMs. The descriptive adjectives that they talked about, I think, is also good. We'll see. I'm excited about it. I'll be doing more sort of in-depth review of that. I really wish they would have shown us the new stat block. That's disappointing, but hopefully in the future videos that they said they're going to do, they will. So yeah, but generally overall, I think it's kind of cool. Um, I think it's going to be much bigger. I like that they've expanded some of the families of creatures like vampires and given them more CR appropriate options for all the different levels. You know, and man, goblin. Oh, and they have like a lower sort of level goblin now because I'll tell you, in Mines of Phandelver, that first encounter. I mean, look on anybody will tell you that that is potentially really a TPK for first level characters. If you play goblins as their at their full ability and with full tactics because they have that hide ability, and that's just brutal. They'll just pepper your characters with arrows, and at first level with one arrow that can take out your characters, potentially kill your character with one arrow shot. Yeah, that's just brutal, and it's 4 goblins, and yeah, it's a total TPK. So I had to nerf the goblins when I did that sort of thing. But so to have a lower tier goblin that you can actually face at first level is really good. Because yeah, in groups, goblins are deadly for first level characters. They're not really a good CR match. But yeah, so we'll see. I'm excited. We'll see what the new Monster Manual holds. Some of the artwork is really great. Some of it's meh, you know. But I'll be doing more in depth of this. Like I say, more in depth of this Monster Manual and sort of what they brought up about it later on in another video. But I just wanted to watch it live and see. So, all right. Have a great day, everybody. I hope all your rolls are nat 20s and have a great day.